Terrible Happy Talks. Terrible Happy Talks.
Yeah, good to be here, man.
Whoa.
Gonna go there. We do it on purpose.
Mr. Donut lifestyle. 3, 2, 1. Alright, let's do this. Today's guest has been on the show a couple of times previously. He's an Australian musician, recording artist, creative, free thinker, and host of the Bent Planet docu-series. And he's also the founder of the Bali Rooftop recording sessions. The first time he was on the show, we delved into his journey to find his biological father, amongst other things. The second time he was on, he gave us an update on that journey and the resolution that he found with it. And he's also playing at the Ubud Folk Festival in Bali this coming weekend. And today he's with me in person in Canggu, Bali, to check in, share journey, experiences, challenges, and hopes for the future.
Hopes for the future, that's a big one.
It is, man. Do you have it? Mr. Athron.
How you doing, man?
Welcome,
good to see
sir.
you. My brother of old school Christian cult upbringings.
We were in a cult. We were born into a cult.
Pretty much, you know.
Look
You
at
could
us
describe
now.
it like that. Look, we've come so far.
We survived it.
From those lounge room sessions where we'd run and play knock and run on the nearby houses. Remember that?
I remember.
Yeah.
And roof rocking.
Oh,
Used
we're
to throw roofs, like rocks
thro-
on tin roofs.
Oh, we did that too. Nice.
Just to fuck with people.
Yeah, good.
I feel bad. Sorry.
Nah,
if you were one of those people, well, we're sorry.
You were a rowdy young teenager, mate. I was a little bit.
Don't expose me like that.
I loved it. I loved hanging out with you. They were crazy days.
Funny, such a small time in our life, but so significant. Yeah.
Oh, hugely significant. Yeah,
I'm really conflicted with religion. I don't
in
know,
what sense? Whether there's a backbone of goodness to it, or
Absolutely. I do think it's a really wonderful thing in a lot of ways, and it does, give a foundation of morals and ethics. It's just that I've struggled with my whole life, I think, but the ritualistic side of it and the dogma that it creates just really challenges me.
I think it's really healthy to teach anyone, any child that's growing up, a solid basis of good morals, which, like, let's say Christianity that we grew up with, that thing that they call the fruits of the spirit, love, forgiveness, acceptance, joy, all these things that are taught to a child that are the basis of, Jesus' teachings or Christianity. Anyone that teaches that in any form, I mean, that's a beautiful thing to teach those things to a growing child. But if with that you're pushing the particular line of belief so strongly that it becomes indoctrination that loses the possibility of real choice, like where you put so much weight on it that if someone thinks, if I choose to move away or even think outside of this box, I will be full of shame and regret and guilt. As soon as that comes into it, it's really dangerous, because then it not only, even if it's just like for that individual, like not to mention the danger in like the conflict of war and all that kind of stuff that can come out of that, believing you're right and someone else is wrong. But even just the inner struggle of, if I dare to think differently, now that I'm hitting my 16-year-old years, coming out of puberty and growing into an adult, if I dare to think differently to what my parents or teachers have taught me, I will be punished internally, like not just by them, but by myself. My guilt and my shame and my regret will be so heavy that I'll be a mess for years. That's dangerous, man.
Is that what you suffered from?
Does that sound like I'm speaking from experience?
Well,
absolutely.
Because I'm going to identify with you. I mean,
and
it was pushed down your throat. It was. It was pushed into you as a child. Yeah, and I know for me personally, I can't speak for you, because it was pushed into me a little bit. I think my mother pulled back pretty early on when she realised that. She doesn't go to church anymore. She's walked away from religion, but still the most spiritual human I know.
Yeah, that's right. You were saying, so she doesn't lean into Christianity anymore,
No.
but she
reads the Bible. She prays to a God of her own understanding.
Okay.
But she doesn't align with it. She might, throw a session in at church every now and then, but she walked away from it.
See, that's a beautiful place to be, like to take those fruits of the spirit that I was talking about, that if she's taken the good things the good morals from that she believes is the right way to live and approach other people, and then just do it in her own way, and understand that it's not like an absolute black and white, has to be this one specific God and set of rules or nothing. Like, if you realise you can walk away from that and hone into your own belief and understanding, that's great. That's awesome that your mum did that, because like a lot of that generation really were unable to change their mind.
But I want to go back to the guilt and shame thing. Like, guilt and shame are feelings that I have battled with, especially shame, and I didn't even know how to identify it for many years, but I've identified it now. It's like a default setting for me. Every time I make a mistake, I go into this form of shame, like you're worthless, you're useless, you're a bad person. That's my inner narrative. And I always wondered where it came from, you know? And I really feel like it came from, you know, my time as a child going to church. You know, I was told to feel shameful about things like masturbation or having premarital sex. Like that was these are big concepts. Like,
and they're big ones because sexuality is.
I just felt you need to speak in the mic a bit more.
Oh, gotcha. Sexuality is such an overwhelming part of a guy's existence through his teenage years, getting used to what that is and what the feelings are and how to control them and what to do with them. And if you add shame to feelings of like, to natural growth feelings of and understanding your own body and what you like, if you add shame into that and guilt, it's really powerful, but in a really negative way. And
such an awkward time as it is.
Yeah, exactly. You know, you want to, you know, you as a kid, you want to be able to talk about that stuff openly without guilt or shame, so that you can understand what it all means. And that's the thing. A lot of those religions, they prefer not to talk about it openly. They prefer to just set the rule. Like, similar thing, like my mum said, she didn't have an open discussion about sex education. She just said, "Oh, you should know that touching yourself is really wrong and it's sinful. And, you know, Jesus is aware if you do it, and
God's watching you.
And you're only going to be doing it if you're thinking sinful thoughts."
Yes.
So immediately, that's what you're talking about. Like, that shame is like, oh, that means that my thoughts are sinful. So
and they're sick, and I'm sick. I've got sick thinking, dirty thinking.
And think about, like, as a 14 to 16-year-old boy, as you're just the sexual overdrive is just building. You look, the substitute teacher walks in, and she's like younger than the normal teacher, and you're just sitting there with like a little stiffy in class going, "I hope she doesn't make me stand up." Everyone will know.
You got like that much testosterone hormone flowing through. You're getting like 1,000 stiffies a day.
And then you're going home just feeling so ashamed, like, "Oh, Jesus knows."
Oh, yeah.
That's wild, eh?
What I'd give for those stiffies. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. No, man, it's interesting, dude.
Yeah.
And it's like, you're one of the very few people I feel like, probably like the only person I talk to about this stuff.
It was a pretty significant time, like when, I mean, my mum went through I went through a lot more with my mother later after meeting you, but that particular time that we met and hung out was like, you know, I suppose if someone's listening, they haven't, not aware, we were hanging out, like, I think I was aged 7 to 9.
Yeah.
So it was like 6 months to a year. We moved down to where you were living, and then my mum did a Bible course that I think your mum was doing.
Probably.
And then the two of them would get together outside of that and have their own hardcore spiritual, like really hardcore spiritual meetings where they would discuss the apocalypse and stuff.
I know, but like in the same token, like I sort of like how like they were hardcore.
Yeah,
you know, they weren't sitting on the fence.
I mean,
you know what I mean? Like, I respect that charismatic approach to, like they're full on. Like, and those people still exist in our society. Like, I liked that full on nature as well. Like, it's
to me, it's all about intention. Like, we can reflect on the negative results of being a kid, sort of taught that stuff, but I still always look at my mother and go, well, the intention was good. Like, and your mum's intention, it was good. Like, they were getting together to save the world and teach more people about the beliefs, and they truly believed people needed to know to be saved. So you do have to understand the intention behind it, for sure.
They were seekers, you know.
Survivors, like.
And survivors. Like, I don't know about your mum's background, but, you know, my mum was a seeker, I think, because she had a really, really hard childhood. So she was just looking for answers to cope with the hard feelings that she was, dealing with, like post-traumatic stress, PTSD for sure, like from her childhood. Her father was a World War II veteran, who was the only survivor on a ship that was bombed.
Wow.
Everyone else died except him. And then he comes back.
Everyone else died except him.
Yeah, crazy story. And then he came back completely traumatized. They used to call it war neurosis, but I think the modern day term is PTSD.
Yeah.
And then he comes back and lives with him and his wife and 4 children, and let's be normal and mow the lawn. And
oh man.
After watching everyone die in an incident, I think there's so many people of our generation from the Western world and beyond who have this intergenerational war trauma that's passed down through the generations.
I mean, that's a big reason why our mothers got together, because they weren't just two totally random people in a massive church. I remember the church, the place where the Bible study was happening it was a massive church, the Fraser's Church. There were hundreds of people there, but there's a reason like 2 women like our mothers found each other in that group and then started meeting outside of it in a house with a small group of other women, because they were all, and I noticed that later in my life too with my mum's, the groups she always clung to, they were always made up of very, very emotionally broken, traumatized women who were often single single-parents or just on their own, didn't have a partner to bounce off, and they would get together to have these incredible, prayer meetings that weren't just about healing each other, but it was about giving each other purpose, because they were saving the world, right? So it's
saving the world and
decent
supporting
purpose.
each other where it wasn't in a time when it wasn't really that open and accepted. It's more accepted now for women's groups and things like that to occur. So I think it's quite admirable what they were trying to do in terms of looking for solutions for coping with a really hard life.
Yeah.
As opposed to the other solutions that many people refer to, and it's, numbing behaviours like drugs and alcohol. And they were trying to face these issues with rigorous self-honesty. And religion does sort of work into that. It's quite a obvious one. Like when everything's been stripped away from you and life feels unbearable, it's very comforting to feel that you can turn to some entity or a higher power to give you this feeling of emotional support when you've got nothing else.
The only thing I'm really saddened by with it all is that leaning into the higher power and believing that higher power will heal all, it did block the option of just getting counselling, of just seeing anyone on the earth that could really help you get through your emotional trauma. And it's really good to hear that your mum's sort of found more of a peace, obviously, with her beliefs. But that was something that always saddened me about my mother, was that she always relied on the higher power to heal her, and therefore she never really healed, because it's like that old parable of or an old, there's that classic story where someone's lying on the side of the road. I can't remember what happened, but they're dying on the side of the road, and someone walks past and asks to help, and they say, no, I've prayed, God's going to heal me, and that happens 3 times.
Keep going.
Yeah, the next person comes, asks the same thing. No, I'm fine. God's going to heal me. Next person, same thing. And then, of course, the person dies from their whatever, gets to heaven and says, I thought you were going to heal me. And they said, God's like, I sent 3 people to help you out. What are you doing? And that's the classic case of that's how I felt, that a lot of the people that leaned too heavily into Jesus healing them of all trauma. I'm sure that if there is a dude upstairs, he's like, there were so many people around you that were offering advice or wanting you to see a counsellor, and you denied that opportunity.
Yeah, I can see how it could put the blinkers on or breed an element of ignorance, right?
Yeah.
It's funny, I was just thinking about that story, and I'm just sort of also thinking, man, damn this life. It's whatever we're doing here as humans, life's hard. Life's so full on, man. I sometimes just get overwhelmed by it, and I'm in this real phase personally of just really surrendering more and more. And when I do that, life just gets better and better. And there's another old parable about the Chinese farmer. Do you hear about that one? Can I tell it real
Was
quick?
it an Englishman, an Irishman, and a Chinese farmer walked into a bar? Or?
How does that one go?
I don't know. Tell me.
No, I want to hear that one.
I have no idea.
Yeah, and it's like he's on a farm, and him and his son, they find all these horses, and they're like, "Oh my, congratulations! You're going to be the richest people in the village, and well done," you know. And the farmer's like, "That's an amazing thing." The people in the village are like, "That's an amazing thing." He's like, "Oh, maybe it is, maybe it isn't." And then the next day, you know, the son is trying to break in one of these horses, and it bucks him off, and it makes him a quadriplegic, or it breaks both his legs. And everyone's like, "Oh my God, that's terrible! Your son's injured, you know, forever. It's a terrible thing." And he's like, "Maybe it is, maybe it isn't." And then the next week, the army come around. His son's conscripted to go to war, and he can't go because of his injury from the horses. And you know, and it's like, I'm not telling it very well, but it's like. And then the farmer's like, "That's an amazing thing." It's like, "Well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't." So it's like everything has its purpose.
Yeah, every single thing could have a result coming out of it, or springing off it. Even if something seems like an amazing thing, that could have a negative result, like winning the lottery and becoming all your friends and family turned against you, or whatever, whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, so when bad things happen, it's like, well, maybe you don't know if that's bad yet. You don't know if that's bad.
Yeah.
But when good things happen, conversely, it's like, well, you don't get too happy with that either. You don't know if that's a good or a bad thing either. So it's really just like rolling with it. And I really feel like the last couple of years through this crazy world of pandemics and whatever, and war and whatnot, I think rolling with it just seems like...
I mean, it's a massive point, the surrender thing, and also it's something that someone has said to me a lot lately, someone close to me, because of my own personal journey of coming out of the pandemic and all the anxieties related to it, and career and all that. And they've just said to me, they've noticed, you always need someone close to you to reflect back at you what you're doing, because half the time you don't recognise it in yourself. And they were continually saying to me, "Look, you really are thinking too much about the past and the future, and not just what's happening right now that is good and positive." And it's that whole surrender the past and the future, let that go, and just focus on all the beautiful, good things right now, because that actually will determine the future in the end. It's not, if you determine the now by the future, it's pointless. It's a backward cycle, right?
Oh, dude. And it's like, as cliched as it is, and it's so obvious and we all know it, like, I need a daily reminder.
Yeah.
Because that's all we have is right now.
It's a cliche because it's really easy to see it in other people. So it becomes like really obvious in other people. You can always see when someone else is doing it, and it becomes a cliche because everyone talks about it, but it's so hard to not do that stuff yourself. Like, you can spend all day comforting your friends and telling them how amazing they are, but then when you wake up in the morning and feel depressed, you don't tell yourself the same thing you told your friends. You just, it's more likely that you end up just going down on yourself and being, then you need the counsellor, and you need someone to come along and point it out, and tell you a few cliches. It's good to hear those cliches. You need to get pulled out of your own spiral.
Yeah, and I think cliches are cliches for a reason, because they're true. You're one of the very few people who's a musician living in Bali and has been able to sustain a living from that for many, many years. For what, at least 10 years?
10 years full time.
Yeah.
Longer. No, 13 now.
Yeah, so...
not including the pandemic, I suppose.
Yeah, which is very unique. Like, not a lot of people are able to achieve that. You really set a precedence for foreign musicians in this country. And I want to know, during the pandemic, when the country was closed down and there's no tourists, give us a breakdown of the last couple of years as a working musician in this country.
Well, as a working musician, it became the opposite of that, because there was no work. So it was a real juxtaposition for me. Like, in one sense, it was devastating, because overnight all the gigs stopped, and so many people have a similar story of just work ending or losing their jobs or whatever. But as a musician, when you base your whole career on it really is a month by month. You know, am I going to have the same residencies next month? Am I going to be booked again? Where am I going to be playing at the end of the year? Is the gig in is my gig in Japan going to be on again at the end of the year? Is my gig here? There's so many ifs. Like there's no certainty when you base your whole life on gigs, gig by gig. There's no one backing you. There's no insurance, all that kind of stuff. So you've always got that, like, you know, I've been doing it for 10 to 13 years, but always with that thing in the back of your mind of like, oh, is this sustainable? Is it, you know, but you love it. So you just keep driving it to get better and better and more needed so that more people will book you and in advance and all that kind of stuff. So when the pandemic hit, it was that real, it did go the worst way possible. Like, this is the time when you wish you had a career where you had insurance, or you were living in a country where you could at least get support, you know, like benefits to help sustain you through a period of no work. All those things that you fear by putting yourself on the line being a solo musician sort of come to fruition. The fear, because you're like, holy shit, I can't even just skip the country and try somewhere else because the whole world is locked down. So anyway, that's the negative side. It was really freaky, and it puts your whole mental state in jeopardy because you think, what have I done and what have my choices been to lead me here? But at the flip side, I stayed in Bali, and I think we talked about this on the last podcast. I got to go up north and live on my cousin's property because it was empty. Mm-hmm. So I was really fortunate. I was in this beautiful, peaceful little village on the coast, you know, on a big property. And despite the lack of work and all that kind of stuff, I was able to survive and be in this incredible place where I just got to give into my creativity and focus on other things and slowly build up other forms of work with my video editing and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I mean, I'm a sucker for self-punishment. So my headspace dropped pretty dramatically in a lot of ways throughout that. It was a real roller coaster. Mm. But I have to appreciate the beauty of what I had as well. And now it's just climbing out of it now. It's not like it's over. You know, tomorrow's my first gig, like back with a working visa again, which is awesome. But it's the first one, and it's now. We've got to see if things get back to how it was. But I've still got to, you know, as that close friend of mine, that close person to me kept saying, look at the goodness in the now. The truth is, it's a lot of good things that came out of that. I've got to appreciate.
Yeah, like I noticed that from an outsider looking in, it's like you almost became more creative, like outside of music. So that docu-series you created, Bent Planet. Can you tell us a little bit about that, like the concept and how it came about and what you're trying to achieve with it?
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the rabbit holes, besides sort of outputting music and all that kind of stuff, and I went deep into creating music videos and learning how to video edit in the downtime of the lockdowns. And then for entertainment, at night, I started going down the rabbit hole of true stories on YouTube. So I actually started with police interrogations. I started watching like just YouTube footage of police interrogations that go for like 3 hours. And I was just fascinated.
And you'd watch them?
They're fascinating. Like
why? What did you find fascinating?
Well, one, they're so far out of the realm of my experience. Like I've lived a life where I've always wanted to live 1,000 characters' lives in one. You know, like
you've never been interrogated?
Because I love writing. I've been interrogated by my mother and by a school principal.
I was saying, you never had a girlfriend?
Okay,
sorry,
yes, no, you are correct.
That's the most sexist thing I've ever seen.
You are correct.
Oh shit!
Or a partner of any kind. Yeah, so I went down this rabbit hole of police interrogations, and then that led into just watching true stories online, and then I found like one particular storyteller online that I just became addicted to. This guy called Mr. Ballin, and at the start of the pandemic, he already had like 2 million followers, and now he's got over 6 million. It's really simple, but he just tells true stories, talking to the camera, of generally horrific crimes or really dark, mysterious, spooky shit, all right? And they're addictive. Like, it's incredibly addictive listening to these stories, and I love it. And as I'm watching him, and I've got time on my hands, and I'm getting better at video editing. I was just thinking, man, I know a lot of people with really fucked up stories, like a lot of people with like crazy ass stories, especially my cousin who was the first guy to get me to Bali. His group of mates, they're all ex-military, and they've all gone on to do incredible work around the world, whether it's like, demining in Cambodia, or, coordinating food drops in Somalia, and having to deal with Al-Qaeda and all this kind of stuff. They've got stories that have always blown my mind, and I've sat around listening to them telling their stories. And I thought, well, as someone that loves this genre, I'm now looking online. Where's another good storyteller where telling a story I haven't heard yet?
Gotcha.
And then I was like, well, I've got a bunch I could tell, and I saw the size of the audience that's into this stuff, and I was like, well, the audience is there, and as opposed to my music, where you're just another folk singer amongst millions trying to get your music out and trying to get heard, and people have got they're killed for choice when it comes to hearing new music. There aren't that many good stories out there that you haven't heard before. So I was like, well, I'll start telling mine. And so yeah, that was the inspiration behind getting it going. And then
When you say telling your stories, they're not your personal stories. They're stories that you know about that haven't actually been really shared.
Yeah, sorry, no. What I mean is stories that I know through other people's experiences. There's a lot of my own stories that I might tell in the future, but for now, it's not really about me. It's about telling other people's stories, and there's something really nice about being able to push a platform that isn't about you and your story, actually. Like, which music always is. It's always your own story. Like, listen to my music. It's so annoying and so cliche to, you want to hear my new song? Like, it's this whole thing of like pushing your emotive story on other people by trying to share your music. And now with Ben Planet, it's this really nice thing of going, I can say to someone, you've got to hear this story. Like, it's a crazy story. Like,
okay, well, tell us a story.
You want to hear a story?
Give us one of the ones that you've done what's your favourite one that you've produced so far?
Well, probably my favourite is the last story I told, which was my cousin, who's a photojournalist, who was kidnapped in Syria. And it's an incredible story. That alone, you hear that and you're like, okay, that sounds pretty intense. And it was. And like, he and I are so close that I knew that he had experienced that, but I had no idea to what capacity. And that's something else that I love about this platform, is it gives me the opportunity to not just have a conversation over a beer with someone I know, where you don't really go into the guts of what someone's experience was, because as mates, you're always a little bit more standoffish, or you mightn't expose too much of yourself about a situation when you're telling a story about something that happened to you. But when you're being interviewed, it's a totally different story. So interviewing my cousin about that, I'm so close. He's one of the closest people to me in the world. But it wasn't until I interviewed him under the guise of Ben Planet that he expressed to me what happened to him when he got kidnapped in Syria. And it was so much more than I had any idea or concept of.
Well, what happened? How did it all go about?
Well, I think I should tell you a different story, because for just a vocal podcast, I'll tell you another story that will work well as just a verbal story.
Sorry to jump in, but when you do produce these stories, you're telling the story verbally, with imagery to go with it.
Yeah. So what I do, that's right. I'll interview the person, then I will take that story, and often an interview can go for hours, and the person who experienced it may not necessarily be good at telling the story. I'm getting all the story out through questions. And then I'll push that down into a concise 10 to 15 minute story that's sort of a bit more, cutting out the bits that aren't necessary and all that kind of stuff. And then I'll tell that story, and I'll create a visual board on screen so that you can watch visually. And I sort of create the visuals and edit it so it's sort of, I try and make it look like how things appear in your brain when you're imagining stuff in the back of your head. Yes. I know that sounds weird, like it's probably hard to visualize if you're listening to this, but anyway, it's easy enough to check out. But
no, it doesn't sound weird.
So that story with my cousin, like if anyone wants to check it out, it's the platform's called Ben's Planet, and it's the last story I put up. about being kidnapped in Syria. It's pretty easy to find. So that's, but I can tell you a story, just a quicker story that's got a bit of a hit to it, which was this first story that I released actually, because it's just a great story and I heard it years ago. It happened to a friend's cousin in Sydney. And this is back in like early 2000s in Sydney. I grew up in the Blue Mountains, which is about an hour west of Sydney City. And the train line between where I grew up and Sydney City, it was pretty sketchy back then. Like, it was at a time where, like, late at night you wouldn't want to be on that train because it goes out through all these western suburbs and it stops at really quiet, sort of spooky, eerie platforms, and in areas where there was lots of like homeboys, you know, that kind of like real, you know, suburban gangsters, guys that just wear real, you know, the baseball cap. Back then it was the baseball caps and the big happy sort of floppy jean pants, like the big wide jeans, and these guys, you know, I got mugged a couple of times myself out on those train lines and beaten up, and there's guys that live in those areas that just, they want to beat you up for the heck of it, let alone steal all your shit, you know. So you don't want to be travelling late at night on your own. Anyway, this story's about this girl called Susan, and she was working in the city and she would catch the train back out west after her shift, and she would generally do it in rush hour and the trains were full and there's no drama. But it was a late night shopping day in the city, so she went out and she got caught up browsing and she ended up in bookstores looking at books, and she just got lost track of the time. So by the time she gets to her station, it's already empty, and she's like, oh man, I hate catching the train this late at night. So she's already spooked, and she's there waiting. She's like, you know, the nerves are on already, and then the train pulls up and doors open and she steps onto the train, and you've got the option of going down into the carriage or up into the carriage, or just where you step onto the train, as most people will be familiar with, you've got an area where most people can stand up, but there's two seats on either opposing wall facing each other. And she could see as she stepped onto the train that there's three people already sitting in that area. So she's like, oh, good, I'll sit near people, you know, I'll feel safer. And they were sitting opposite. So she sort of steps to the left, and then sits down in front of them. So she feels like, okay, there's people around, that's good. Puts her bags of shopping down and then glances up and immediately gets hit with this, oh my God, these are the exact people I wanted to avoid. There's like three people, two guys and a girl, full homeboy, full suburban gangsters, like the kind of people that you just do not want to run into out on those platforms. Two guys sit either side of a girl. The guys are like, sort of got that real sketchy, like look like they're like dodgy, like they might be on something, kind of. They look very sort of agitated and not cool. And then there's a girl that's also dressed like them, but she's sort of slumped between them, and they're leaning in on her, and she's got her head down and a baseball cap pulled down, you know how they often do, and when she sort of glances from either side to the guys and then looks at the chick in the middle and realises the chick in the middle is just staring her down. So, you know, immediately she's just gets a wave of adrenaline and pulls her eyes away straight away and looks down and goes, oh shit, God damn it, like, what's going to happen? And so her heart starts beating, and then she just, you know, as you do, you naturally glance back up again to check again, and again, the chick is just staring at her, hasn't even taken her eyes off her, and she's, oh my God. So she's feeling nervous and sweat start kicking in. She's like, oh my God, how many stops do I stop? Oh my God, it's like 45 minutes. Oh shit, man, there's so much time for me to get mugged in this period of time. She looks up again, the chick's just staring at her still, just cutting through her with her icy gaze. And shit, pulls her eyes away. Oh my God, so she leans down and pulls a book out, starts flipping through the book. And then she's seeing her shopping and she's thinking, oh my God, I've got like bags of new stuff. Like these guys are just, they're the kind of guys, they're going to like look at all my bags of stuff and they're going to have a go at me, they're going to want to steal the shit. And then she looks up and the chick again is just cutting through her with this fucking stare. Oh my God. And the tension is building and building, and she's getting this, like, just hairs in the back of her neck standing up. And she's thinking any second now, this chick's gonna say something like, what are you looking at, or whatever. And she looks up one more time, the chick's still staring at her. And now she's like, okay, now it's 5 times we've met eyes, so there's no way this chick's gonna let it go. She's about to say something. Just as she's thinking that's about to happen, the train starts slowing down and the screech of the brakes hit and pulls into a platform. She's like, okay, it's breaking the tension a bit. Hopefully some people get on. And then a ticket collector gets on the train. And she's like, oh, okay, a bit of relief. And she looks up, and the ticket collector first looks at her and just says, ma'am, ticket please. And she goes, okay. So she pulls out a ticket and shows him. He looks at the ticket and goes, sorry, ma'am, this is not a valid ticket. She looks at him and goes, well, yeah, it is. And he goes, no, it's not a valid ticket. You're going to have to get off the train. She goes, wait, what? Now she's like just confused and distracted. And she says, no, it's a valid ticket. Like I just bought it at the platform before I got onto the train. And he goes, no, ma'am, it's not a valid ticket. So if it's not valid, you can't be on the train. You have to get off. And she's like, no, I'm sorry, but if it's not valid, the ticket machine's broken. I just bought it. And he stares at her and he goes, no, ma'am, the ticket is not valid and you need to get off the train. She just goes, okay. So she grabs her bags, she picks them up and she starts moving towards the door, and then he sort of puts his arm around her and pulls her and pushes her off the train and joins her. As he's pushing her off the train, all these police start running onto the train. She's like, what the hell is going on? And he shuffles her right behind all the police, all the cops rush in. She sees some commotion going on and she gets pushed to the back. And so she doesn't want to leave yet. She's like, what's going on? And she grabs a cop and says, what's going on here? Like, what happened? Who are these guys? And the guy says, well, at a platform before you obviously got on, security cameras picked up two men dragging someone onto a train, and it's a body. So the girl that was staring you down is actually dead.
Oh my God, dude. I got goosebumps. I did not see it going that way. Like Weekend at Bernie's.
Weekend at Bernadette's.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's intense.
I got full goosebumps. I didn't expect that.
Yeah, it's a good
So she was sitting there getting vibed out by a dead body.
Yeah, it was a true death stare.
That is the best story.
Yeah, it's a brutal one, huh?
You know, and I was thinking, like, you tell it so well. And it's like, my question is, I mean, you must believe in the power of stories. Is there still a place for them in today's oversaturated, content-rich...
There will never not be a place in society for good stories.
That's a fucking good story. Is that a true story?
Yeah. Because every single thing we are fed with, like despite the massive amount of media and social media hitting us all now, the things within all that stand out that we are attracted to, and the ones that work are the ones that have a story. And it mightn't necessarily be a story like I just told, like an actual story with characters or whatever, but you are naturally inclined to be pulled towards something that has a story, has some depth to it that you can relate to or you can be fascinated by. So there will always be a place in society for stories. It's our oldest tradition, you know, outside of sex. It's probably like, you know, sitting around a campfire telling stories. You know,
it's what perpetuated evolution of civilizations forever.
Passing on information.
I mean, especially if we relate it to Australian Indigenous culture, it was all about the dream time and telling stories and passing on the local law that way.
Yeah.
Because that was the only way they could do it.
Like the same way that when we sit and look at a fire, we're suddenly overwhelmed with the ability to go, I could sit here. There's something within our makeup and our DNA that can sit and look at a fire and feel comfortable and want to just keep staring at it. And that comes from, you know, the whole, like you said, the tribal evolution of man sitting around a fire. It's the place of warmth. It's the place that signifies food and the ability to cook, and it's the community. Everything about that fire, everything the fire symbolises is that. And part of that was storytelling. You know, what do you do when you sit around a fire? You share stories. And then through those stories, you're passing on information to the new generation of moral standards, or you're just entertaining people.
Wow, dude. Like, honestly, I'm not even joking. I just got hit with this wave of like, and now I'm thinking about it, like that woman was sitting across obviously a dead body, but two murderers, potential murderers, like psychopaths.
Yeah, there's a big question mark, you know, what could have gone on there.
You don't know, but either way, they're trying to transport a dead body on a public train.
Yeah.
Weekend at Bernadette's. Oh, we shouldn't joke about that because, like, no disrespect if that story's linked to someone that listens to this.
Sure.
Obviously, our condolences, but that's
the funny thing is with that story,
it's morbid as fuck.
And the interesting thing is, it's nowhere near as bad as a lot of the other stories I tell in terms of what someone went through. Like, at the end of the day, like, she was freaked out, but it's but there's something about the punch line at the end of that story, the darkness of it, that really affects people. It's like it's a real puncher. But a lot of the other stories I tell are much more traumatizing situations people have gone through. But I think it's the overall story that's quite full on rather than just that hit at the end.
Do you think it's the truth factor that makes them so engaging?
For sure. Like, that's a big part of it.
Well, how do you authenticate that, though?
Yeah, that one's a tough one because that one's just they didn't want to do an interview and go live with it. So that's probably out of all the stories I've told, that's probably the least, like, you know, it's just one of those things. I know it's a true story, but that's the least I'm able to authenticate it. But generally, I'll ask to do a Zoom where I video the interview, and then I can also publish the interview. So I'll release my version of it that I tell it when I'm telling it, and then I'll follow that up with the release of the full interview so people can really see the person telling the story themselves. So I always try and add anything I can, and even when I tell the story, I add photographs and images given to me by the person. I mean, that train story it was a long time ago. It's probably 20 years ago now, I guess.
But that's not that long ago. Like 20 years is like
in the whole world of stories. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess.
I mean, that train format that you were describing with the multi-level, like those trains are still being used in Sydney. They're the same trains.
Actually, I'm just doing because I was just back in Sydney, doing a bunch of stories out of Sydney, and one of the next stories I'm doing is on sliding doors. It's like people that have been in experiences where they, you know, could have gone one way or the other, and just based on one small decision, life could have been very different. And one of them is the story of my grandfather and one of the worst mass death incidents in Australia, which was the Granville train disaster. Yeah, train that came off the tracks.
Where the overpass collapsed on the train?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, the train derailed first, and then the third and fourth carriages plummeted into the pillar beneath the overpass, and then shortly after derailing, before anyone had a time to get off the train, the bridge, the overpass collapsed.
Sequence of events, yeah.
Yeah, brutal. And I'll tell you now, my grandfather, he caught the same train every day from Blue Mountains, where I grew up, into the city. The same train line as that last story. Every morning, same train, same time, same seat, with the same 3 other friends. That was just like the tradition. They'd all meet at the train station, they'd get on, they'd sit on and it was, you know, they were early on the train, so they had a better selection of seats. And they would sit on the same 4 seats without fail every day. He was an accountant in the city. One night, his daughter, Trish, my auntie, came by unexpectedly and kept him up late chatting. And normally he loved he took a lot of homework home. So we always did a lot of work at home the night before. But he was up all night talking to her. So the next morning he woke up early and he went, you know what? I'm going to catch the earlier train just to get into work and get that work done.
I can see where this is going.
Yeah, you can see where it's going.
Keep going.
So catches the earlier train, and then of course he hears this news flash on the radio that the train's derailed in Granville, and his carriage and the seat he would have been sitting on was completely crushed, so he would have been killed. So first of all, that's an amazing sliding door right there.
Dude, a literal
So
sliding
of course, after he calls his wife, my grandmother, and says he's alive and says he's okay, he then proceeds to call the families of the 3 mates to wish his condolences, because he knows they were on that train. Every single one of them missed the train that day.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
This life is a trip, dude.
I know, isn't it? I mean,
and they were meant to be on that train.
Yeah, and there's always the flip side to these stories, is that there's always the people that probably caught that train and they didn't usually catch the train, and there's a horrible flip side, but it is beautiful to hear the stories of survival the positive sliding doors anyway. Yeah,
and for me it's just this real stark reminder that we think we're in control of this life in this world, but we're really not. You don't know
so many variables
when that's going to something like that's going to happen.
The bit we've got control of, I guess, is the bit you were talking about before of the surrender and the mental attitude you have within the moment. You know, that's the bit that's your choice.
And it reduces mental suffering. There's no doubt about it. You know, like I'm only suffering when I'm ruminating on past events that might have been painful. That's when I'm suffering. Events that happened, even if they happened 2 minutes ago, I can't change them now. And I also suffer when I'm worrying about what could happen in the future that actually hasn't happened. That's when I'm suffering.
It's such a big one, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm not suffering when I'm in the middle.
Yeah.
You know, I like talking, like right here, right now, talking to you, I'm not suffering.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, again, these aren't original concepts, but for me, personally, I need this daily reminder. I need to, if I don't keep reminding myself of that. And I find that when I do this daily reminder of that concept I just relayed to you, it's like this reprogramming, rewiring of my brain, and it does become the default setting. So
that's the thing. It's really about retraining the way you think. It's amazing how the stress about the future. Often you're stressed about. You can be stressed about a particular event that may, okay, let's say for an example, let's say I was nervous about a gig, and the gig goes for 45 minutes, say. Like, if a gig only goes for 45 minutes and I'm really nervous about it, and I spend 2 weeks being nervous about something going wrong that will only last 45 minutes, like, where's the balance in that? And you're better off just focusing on the now and rehearsing for that 45 minutes and focusing on that 45 minutes, making sure you're prepared for it. And then if it goes badly in that 45 minutes, okay, well, it did, but it only went for 45 minutes. Like, why waste 2 weeks of your life thinking that might happen, you know?
But I think the irony, as a musician, don't musicians epitomise present moment awareness? So when you're singing a song, like, you're only really focused on playing those chords and getting those lyrics out. You know, you're not thinking about the bills you got to pay tomorrow.
Well, that is.
Are you?
You're absolutely right. And there's a funny sort of catch-22, I guess, to that. The reason so many musicians are quite emotionally fucked up is because of that. Because not because of that, but let me explain. What you just said, that in the moment of singing and playing guitar and being in the zone of music, you are right. You lose all anxiety. You're in the moment, 100%. And the reason that's so freeing and so awesome, and the reason you get addicted to it and you just go, that's it, I'm doing this for life, is because you'd have so many musicians and creative people have emotional trauma that they don't want to think about, that they want to escape. And so therefore that becomes their drug. It becomes their escape from that. So you're absolutely right. It's like, it's the most beautiful place to be is music. Like, I used to always, when I was younger, I was like, the 3 places that I felt safe was like singing or being in the middle of music, being on drugs, or in the middle of a good movie. Because either one, I was just disappearing into a beautiful different place.
Sex?
Yeah. Sex too, I'm sure, but that's only 23 seconds, right?
Wow, overachiever.
But yeah, in terms of completely disappearing from yourself. I mean, it's funny. We joke about sex, but sex is still very much you. A lot of it's to do with you in the moment, maybe with one other person, obviously, hopefully. but music, drugs, and movies, you're almost in a place that doesn't involve your physical body at all. Yeah. You're just disappearing into a different, beautiful realm. And you're not attached to the earth, and you're not attached to your physical body. It's just, you're gone. Yeah. Yeah, there's something that's really special about that. Surreal.
It's very surreal. Oh, man. I didn't expect, I love having you on as a guest. And I just really think you've got a great voice, obviously, because you're a singer, but the way you present ideas, they're so concise. I think that's why I enjoy having you back on. You know?
Thanks, man.
But
I love chatting with you. I love it.
But I've just really thought about because I think a lot about, the state of our culture in regards to content. So there's been such a shift in pop culture where people really are just, all they do is they watch YouTube more than ever. They're watching TikTok clips more than ever that go for short periods of time. And I often think about the quality of content. I think I think I heard a story about how there's less movies being made than there ever has been, and things like that. But just sitting here then listening to a story being told, there was no visual, which I think is a bit of a cheat in a way. You know, like even with the podcast, I didn't want to go into the visual aspect too much because I feel like when people are just listening to the audio, they're forced to use their imagination a little bit more and visualize what that person looks like, and then it's more authentic and has a more profound impact on them. So I haven't had a story told to me like that in a long time. And I must admit, like my mind was just creating all these visions and ideas. I could see the train and that girl staring at her. I knew the exact type, and she would have had baggy pants on and she had a hat down on. I visualised the whole scenario.
Yeah, that's a big reason why with the visuals I do on YouTube, I've specifically, I mess with it so it looks a bit dreamy. I don't want it to be too clear, and I don't want to tell you what it looks like.
It's the little prompts, right?
Yeah, it's sort of a cloudy. I try and put onto the screen what the way your brain sort of just melds stuff together, and you get this sort of blurry idea of what's going on. Yeah.
The question I was building up to though is, do you feel there's the lost art of storytelling is falling by the wayside, or is it evolving? So people are telling stories now through reels and things like that.
I think definitely there's a massive loss in one sense when it comes to reels and just the way social media depicts what is a good thing for you to be attracted to, and I mean all that obvious stuff, and the ability to get a good story across, like in a real fast soundbite or catchphrase or whatever, is so limited. So I think there's a massive amount of junk flying at everyone. Like it's just flying at your brain, all this shit.
Yeah.
But people's desire to be drawn into a good story, I do not believe that's changed. And I think even more than ever, if they give it the chance, if a good story grabs them and takes them in, more than ever, it's apparent and necessary, and it's not going to get lost. They're never going to lose that desire. Did I sway from the question or?
No.
Yeah.
Okay. No, yeah, it is.
Yeah. Like there's more junk than ever, like disguising the good stories, I guess. But
there is, but there's an art to doing it. Like the way you did it then, like it was so refined, and it can tell it takes practice, and it's a skill set, you know. Is that skill set, being passed around?
Yeah, I hope so.
I think it is.
I think there's still a lot of people that really value, like.
I think so.
And they learn how to tell a story, whether it's verbally, like I just did, or whether it is visually, or whether it's through presenting their company and like getting people to want to either buy from them or come in and enjoy a coffee in their cafe or whatever. Everyone is you're having to learn the art of telling your story in a way that pulls people into what you're doing, whatever it is. So I think there's always a realm where people have to learn how to tell their story. Yeah.
Wow, man. I love it, dude. Love it. Listen, I want to just touch on a few things. So, like, because you've been on 3 times now, like, I really do see the podcast as, like, documenting history, and, I really want to I like going back to past guests to, loosely document their life journey. On the first podcast, you told a story about, looking for your biological father on a search for that, which I think was really amazing of you to be vulnerable and share that, because I feel like there'd be a lot of other people out there who would have similar feelings in the world. And then that was an amazing story. Then the second time you're on, there was a bit of a resolution to that journey, correct?
Huge resolution. Yeah.
So, can you give us a quick recap? So, originally, you didn't know exactly who your biological father was.
So originally, I believed I knew who he was my whole life, and but didn't grow up with him, and he lived in the States, I lived in Australia. I found brothers and sisters online in my 20s, built up a relationship with them over 10 years, until I finally went, late 30s to meet them and the father. And then by the end of the 3 days of an amazing experience together, he then told me he didn't believe he was my father. So there was this huge, what the hell? And that led to DNA tests, which led to discovering that he wasn't, in fact, my father.
He was right.
He was right, which was a huge flip of the universe.
Which would have been hard for you.
Yeah, it was insane. Yeah, it was pretty full on. And then flash forward, I think the last time we did a podcast, I had just found out who my biological father was after another 6 to 8 years of investigations and like crazy searching and more DNA results and stuff, which was incredible. Like, yeah, like I'd basically given up on the whole thing almost, and then just through incredible circumstances found out who he was. And so
amazing.
I don't know exactly where it was last time we spoke, but I think I had the DNA results that I did know who he was. Yeah. So I guess the funny thing is that since then, like before the pandemic, every year I was going to the States and working. And since the pandemic, I haven't been able to get back there. But also since the pandemic, I've found out who my real father was. He's passed away, unfortunately, but he had 3 amazing kids who are my brother and sisters. So now I've got this incredible relationship with them, but it's all been remote.
So you've been communicating regularly?
Really regularly. I mean, we talk like we grew up together. It's incredible. Like it really is. We're in a group chat and it really is like we've grown up together. Like there's something to say for nature over nurture as well. You know, there's a big part of it.
So is it filling a big hole in you? Is it filling a gap?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's just a huge resolve. Like maybe the sadness of knowing that he passed away before I got to meet him is replaced with the beauty of getting to know him through them and getting to know them, of course. And so now I'm making plans to get to the States, and yeah, like I guess the catch up would be that I'm still in the process. I haven't been there yet. I haven't met them face to face, but I will be. I would say within 6 months I'll be meeting them face to face.
So you think nature over nurture?
Well, there's just a massive. You couldn't legally, I'm sure it's been done illegally, but you couldn't set up legally a scientific study where you separate kids at birth and then, 40 odd years later, you ask them questions and check what's nature over nurture. Like you just can't. But I'm a rare case where I can look at the facts because I'm in that situation. And these are brother and sisters that I haven't grown up with, and what are the similarities and all this kind of stuff. And it is amazing, like our similar humour and just the way we get each other. Like even the humour alone, like we're just right on the same page.
Wow.
And then hearing all about my father character traits that I'm like, my God, that is me. Like incredible.
Well, because you have a bit of a condition called restless
leg syndrome.
Restless legs,
yeah.
And didn't you find out that he had that as well?
Well, yeah, like in the Zoom conversation with I'd tracked with all the information I'd done. I had the massive, detective board on my wall of, family trees and stuff, trying to pinpoint who my father might be. And when it finally came down to a Zoom conversation with a woman who I knew I was somehow related to, but no idea how, I'm presenting her the whole story and going, is there anyone within the realm of your family that, may have hooked up with my mum 40 odd years ago? And in the end, she's like, after looking at all the evidence I'd put together, she was like, I think my brother could be your father, which would make me your auntie. And I'm like, wow. Then she goes, is there any chance you suffer? First she said, do you have flat feet by any chance? And I'm like, I've got the flattest feet on the earth, basically. And she goes, and then it came up, like, do you have restless leg syndrome? And I'm like, yeah, like extreme. It dictates my life.
Still?
And yeah. And she was like, yeah, well, they're 2 sort of genetic things that could be passed on, and my brother had both of those. Plus, I've got these really weird fingernails. Like my friends call me the claw because see how my nails are curved.
Yeah, ape-like.
Yeah, ape-like, gecko-like, or whatever you want to call it. But it's
that must be good for picking the guitar.
Actually, they're not. You'd want it to be, but they grip it the way that you don't want it. Anyway, one of my friends was like, "You should send a picture of your claws to your possible family before we got the DNA test done. Send a picture of your claws and see if." And so I did. I took a photo of my fingers, sent it to them, and went, "I know this is weird, but like, did your father have fingers like these by any chance? Because this is random fingernails." And the sister writes back and goes, "Look, we didn't want to say anything, but we had already zoomed into a photo of your hands and gone, oh my God, he's got Dad's claws." So yeah, like that's true. Yeah, and then we got the DNA, and yeah, it's.
Here's a question: do you feel love for them?
Oh, huge amount. Yeah, and from them. I think the the most incredible thing is that it could have been anyone, and it could have been another story of like, I didn't expect love. Didn't expect anything, just wanted to find out who it was for closure. But to find them and receive so much love, like an unbelievable amount, they couldn't offer more, is incredible. So, and that's equally reciprocated by me.
Wow, man.
Yeah.
You're such an interesting guy.
Yeah, pretty wild journey.
You are so
pretty
interesting.
Wild journey, that one. Yeah.
It's a great one. Thanks for sharing it. Can you just give us a quick recap of the Restless Legs, just to satisfy my own curiosity? Is it a neurological?
Yeah, it is.
Disorder.
Yeah. I mean,
so is it related to central nervous system or?
Yeah, well, they still can't pinpoint exactly. They can find a lot of things that does cause it, because a lot of people get it to a degree, like a little bit, from lack of iron or lack of magnesium, or there's lots of things that can cause it. But when you've got it as extremely as I do, there's also a really major level of restless leg syndrome that is, they just don't understand it, but they believe it is neurological, that it's a misfiring of neurons from the brain to the lower half of the body.
So your legs will twitch or move around?
No, it's that they don't move involuntarily. It's that you have to move them to appease the pain. So like the longer you're inactive, i.e. trying to sleep, the longer you're still, the more the feeling builds up. It's like it's literally just building and building and building up, like this feeling of like deep electrical itching, like you've got itching powder and electricity and ants all crawling around through your nervous system in your legs. That's what it feels like, and they just get more and bigger and more and more and more until you just go, and you just got to jump up and move around and punch your legs and massage them and move around. And if you're doing that all night, you don't sleep. And meanwhile, your head's just desperate to fall asleep. God. So it really screws your brain. Been a few songs come out of it.
Yeah. So has it led to insomnia?
Oh yeah, I mean I've had years of lack of sleep, but I found the one thing that helps for anyone out there, if you've got access to it. For me, the one thing that's natural that helped is kratom, which is
someone else was talking about kratom.
Yeah,
it's a tea, isn't it?
It's a leaf. It's a leaf that's just ground down into a powder, and you just mix it with hot water or put it in a smoothie or whatever you want, and you drink it. Hits the opiate receptors, so it's it's not legal in all countries, so you have to be aware of the legalities. Pharmaceutical companies hate it because a lot of people use it instead of pharmaceuticals to deal with anxiety or pain relief, or it really helps with a lot of things. Yeah. But like anything, you've got to know your dose and you've got to treat it, with respect. And honestly, it's the only natural thing I've ever taken that allows me to fall asleep and have a good night's sleep. And I only found it a few years ago. Wow. So,
have you tried CBD oil?
I haven't had a chance to try it properly because I live in Indonesia. But if I get to the States and I'm staying there, I'll probably give that a really good red hot go.
Legal in Australia now.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Okay. Prescription or?
No, just...
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I heard you talking about it earlier.
February 2020, I think it was legalised.
Ah, okay. That's awesome.
So, like, has virtually, like, really low or no trace elements of, well, very small trace elements of THC in it. Yeah. But it's all the other components of cannabis in it. And, for me, someone who's really suffered from just poor sleep in the course of their life, through, like, consistent use of it, it's done this thing to my central nervous system where it's like, I wouldn't say suppressed it, like, because I still have the same amount of energy and can go about everything as normal daily activities, but it's kind of just like balanced everything out.
Yeah, wow.
And it got me into just really, through consistent use, just got me into these really good sleep patterns and going to bed making me want to go to bed at good times and then going into that deep sleep.
How long did it take to get to a balanced out point?
Well, I mean, it's sort of a balance. Well, then to the point where, like, I don't even use it to sleep anymore. I don't even need it. Like, just because my body's, it's like it's reset my central nervous system. Wow. So, I think at first it was like I would use, like, you notice the effect of it from the first time you use it, and you just go small doses every day for about a week, and then I just noticed throughout that week got better and better. And then after a week of doing that, I might not use it for a couple of weeks. And I mean, it's really helped with anxiety as well, you know, like.
Well, that's great.
But it's a natural way of doing it. It's not like this miracle cure to things like anxiety and sleep. It's a good supplement to helping with those things.
Yeah,
You
sure.
should be doing other things like exercising and eating well as well. But
Yeah. There's always a whole, you know, all-round view of things that need to be done to.
But I heard the kratom is really good, and also I heard they're going to make it illegal, but purely for like political reasons, like because the pharmaceutical companies can't regulate it and they can't profiteer off it.
There's that, and also the palm oil industry wants to get all the kratom farmers off that land. They want their land for palm, the palm industry, palm oil industry.
Is palm oil the most evil
I've
farming practice ever?
Yeah. I've spoken to one of the farmers directly, and that's what he was telling me, that there's a lot of pressure to kick them off the land by the palm oil industry, which is really sad. Yeah, so there's lots of, I mean, there's always so many things involved, like, you know, so much political corporate bullshit when it comes to like trying to just get access to a natural remedy for something. So yeah, it is pretty scary if it becomes totally illegal.
Yeah, I mean these are whole other conversations, but I do start thinking about that side of our world, and it just I get so overwhelmed with it, and I'm like, it's just we're too broken sometimes.
But there's it's pretty awesome that at the same time, all the banning of even the study of drugs to help, you know, like psychedelics and things like that, and marijuana and
changing.
MDMA and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that's all changing for the positive, right? Like, you know, just the use of psilocybin. Yeah, I always stuff up that word, but all that stuff, that's really positive growth for humanity. To realise how beautiful that is for the mind and how much it can help you.
Yeah, I had a psychologist on here a while back, and he's a psychologist for many, many years, and he advocates for the use of psilocybin in psychiatric assisted therapy. So it should be, you know, part of an overall mental health program. And he said, you know, he can't really prescribe it or anything like that, but he's an advocate for it. And I mean, it's talked a lot about in those industries now.
Yeah.
And I think in California, they've actually legalized the use of it for the treatment of addiction and PTSD. And he's on a government working group for the legalization of it. I think it's in its third stage clinical trial in Australia. And
yeah, the positive outcome
it's going to happen.
of it
He really believes it's going to be.
Yeah, it's incredible. Man, it's some of the best brain resets I've ever had in my life.
Is
with
it?
Just huge
In what
LSD or
way?
mushroom trips.
How's it giving you a reset, you think? Just giving you a different perspective?
An example for me would be, let's say you drive to work for an hour, or let's say you drive to work every morning, and every morning there's the worst traffic jams to get to work. But it's the only route you know to get to work, so it's the only route you ever take, and every day you're just sitting there just frustrated going for hours in bad traffic. And then one day someone just reaches down and drops a GPS system into your brain, and all of a sudden your brain sees a different route to get to work that isn't clogged and doesn't have a traffic jam. And then 20 minutes later you're at work and you're more relaxed and you're less anxious, and you're like, oh my God, you mean the answer was there the whole time? I just didn't have access to that different pathway. I feel like psychedelics, psilocybin and LSD, and if you have a real big hit and it opens up your mind and it rewires the way you think, and it allows you, I mean, that can sound scary, of course, but it does it in a way that allows your brain just to go, there's other ways to look at things. And if you can do it in a way to get through, to bring up trauma and get through it with a positive outlook on it, I've found I've come out of those experiences just going, oh my God, I feel like I just found a different way of thinking of that.
Can we delve into it a little bit? So during that trip, you'll go through periods of intensity, but do you always come out with a positive outcome every time?
This is why I think I understand you'd generally, if you're treating people, you want to do it in a clinically safe environment and guided. I had one really bad trip when I was in my 20s, mushroom trip, but also I think a lot of it's to do with the attitude going into it. Like I was just doing it to party really, and I had way too much, and I completely just lost it on mushrooms. And I
Mixing it with alcohol?
I might have had a few beers, but I just did way too much, and I wasn't going into it wanting to explore and become a better person. I just wanted to get off my head, you know. So it freaked me out, and then I came out of it, and every time I thought about that experience, it freaked me out. But the last time I did a really intense trip, I had for 2 years, like it had been a long time prior since I'd done one, and I'd spent a few years watching all these YouTube videos and listening to podcasts about all the current information on how good it can be for you, and how if you go into it and use it as a positive way of self-growth and looking at things differently. So I already had that in my head, like that I really wanted a self-transformation. And when the opportunity came to do it, I still remember the moment that I felt, it was a really intense trip, and I felt the knocking on the door of this could go bad. And I still remember that moment, you know, I was hallucinating so much that the entire world was melting and, you know.
But at the same time, in control of your faculties?
Well,
I
was in control of my faculties. Like but to be honest, I was hallucinating like so much. It probably would have been,
Were you a danger to society?
I wasn't a danger to society, but
were you a danger to yourself or others?
I could have been a danger to myself if I'd walked too far and gone and fallen into an infinity pool or something. But, you know, that's why clinically guided stuff is probably safer, or doing it with friends that are, you know, I don't know. But this just happens to be the situation I was in, and I didn't expect to go that hard. and I did end up being by myself. But anyway, there was a moment where I remember thinking, I could feel the fear coming, and this trip could go bad, and I could turn into a nightmare. And then I remember remembering hearing guys like Terence McKenna, who are such big advocates for it all, and saying there is no such thing as a bad trip. Anything you face in that, even if it's a nightmarish situation, it's things that are coming out that need to be worked through. And I remember thinking that and going, okay, let it happen then. Like if it's going to be bad, let's go. So I just sat down, crossed my legs, put my hands on my knees, and just went, if it's going to be bad, let's go, let's do it. And then like the craziest shit happened, but it wasn't negative. It was incredibly, I came out of it feeling incredibly positive.
Surrendered?
I guess I surrendered. Like it was pretty wild. I turned around. How much time we got? You want to hear a quick version?
I don't set a time limit, but
okay,
I can tell another story.
Well, this is just a personal thing that I.
Sorry about my coughing, everyone.
I basically at that point, when I was younger, I did a lot of LSD, and I never saw stuff that wasn't actually there. Like you might be looking at a tree, and it'll sort of take the shape of a huge, you know, figure, and like you'll look up at the stars, and the stars will look like they're weaving in and around each other and swirling around, and things like that happen. But I hadn't actually like literally seen a physical object that didn't exist in reality.
Like an apparition.
And then this moment, as I gave myself into the whole trip, I turned my head, and sitting over about 5 meters away to my left was this black dude. Like it looked like some tribal guy had all paint on his face, and his hair was up in this like incredible sort of style, and wearing sort of just nothing, you know, just robish kind of old school clothing. And I didn't communicate verbally, but he started talking to me, and I guess it was just mental. He wasn't moving his mouth, but he was just looking at me. And he just said, at the same time, I'm trying to get the order right, but at the same time I looked up, and all these people started flying past my vision, like all sorts of different characters, like from old men to women to all sorts of different. I'm just like looking at it like someone's flipping us through a sketchbook. And I look back at him, and he just looks at me and he goes, I was the first and you are the now, and they are all the people that came between, like of you. Like that is,
I've got goosebumps again.
They're all the versions of you that have existed, and I was the first and you are the now. And I'm just like, really? And then I'm looking at him, and he just goes, are you ready to step into your manhood? And I'm like, and I remember panicking and thinking, I don't know if I'm ready. And it's probably been a big part of my life over the last 5 years, going into 40s. That whole, growing up shit.
Is that because you never had a male role model as a kid?
Possibly, yeah, could be a big factor. And I kind of started panicking, thinking maybe I'm not ready. And then again, I went, no, this is where you have to be ready and accept. So I looked back at him and just went, like, yes, I'm ready. And then he just nods at me. And then I look up, and off in the distance in the sky, I just see this massive bird flying towards me, like getting closer and closer until it's like 10 meters away, and it's got like meters wingspan. It's like massive. Like it's a hallucination. It's like massive, unrealistically huge bird. And then it comes all the way down, just flapping its wings, hovering. And then it's about 2 meters up above me, and I'm sitting, like I said, cross-legged with the backs of my hands resting on my knees, kind of in that yoga-ish kind of pose. And then it spins around, and so it's got its back to me, and it brings its wings up and its legs up until it's in the same pose as me. And then it just slowly like glides back against me until I'm like, oh my God. And then it just enters me, like morphs with my body. And I just sort of go, what the hell's going on? And then I just get this sort of rush of like, oh my God, the bird just entered my body, like morphed with me. And then I turn around and look back at the dude, and he just gives me this nod, like,
you're a man now?
It's done.
Holy shit, dude.
Yeah, it was wild. Like, I came out of that just going, holy shit. Yeah, it was like, I haven't done ayahuasca, but it felt like what people describe as an ayahuasca experience, where you just come out of it going, I don't know what that meant, but damn, it feels kind of cool.
Would you call it a spiritual experience?
Yeah, I mean, everyone's interpretation of spiritual is different, I guess, and it felt like that. Whatever it was, I mean, I came out of it feeling pretty amazing, to be honest.
Are these the spiritual experiences that religious practitioners aspire to?
I think you aspire to a spiritual experience if the result is positive and causes growth. Like, because you could say I could say I had spiritual experiences as a kid by being attacked by demons at night, because... Did
you?
Yeah, like...
In a dream?
Oh, who knows? But like that was part of my experience growing up, because I thought we talked about this actually.
We probably did.
Yeah, just like...
Because, oh my God, this is spinning me out. I'm going to share something in a minute. Keep going. Yeah,
I had really often like those experiences, and my mother confirmed that yes, you are being attacked by demons, and that's why I have to pray in tongues and cast the demons away, and hardcore crazy shit. Since then, I've studied that stuff, and there's science calls them night terrors, where you have sleep paralysis, so you can't move, you feel something attacking your body physically, and you hallucinate and visually watch that thing attacking you. Yeah, so
I don't have... Do you have it anymore?
I haven't had one for about 5 years, so this is the longest I've been without one, which is great. But they were way more common the closer you go back in time towards the trauma of those beliefs I had, the more common they were, which is quite interesting. But anyway, my point was like that a spiritual... I could say those are spiritual experiences and they're negative, but I think the spiritual experiences that people aspire to are the ones that cause positive growth and bring you out of a dark place, not push you in it.
And did that make a real change for you afterwards, that experience you had? With
the demon or the eagle? Or the bird?
Eagle, the bird.
Yeah, I felt really...
You felt different afterwards?
I felt refreshed. I was building my brain up into a real place of anxiety before that, and then it like just washed my brain out. And for quite some time afterwards, I just felt re-grounded. Like everything's okay. Like, because you get this otherworldly experience of like, it removes you from the physical state and geographical position you're in, surrounded by all your anxieties. It just goes, they're just all related to your one little moment of experience and the physical body you're in. Like, there's so much more beyond that. And if you just let it all wash away for a moment and get a bird's eye view, which I guess...
No pun intended.
No pun intended. Then you get to refresh that brain and like get that GPS system and look at a new way of... Look at things differently, from a new perspective, and cut out the shit middleman.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, that analogy of the GPS system's amazing. Was that experience under psilocybin or LSD?
That was LSD.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a difference, or is it creating the same experience?
I've had I think they are quite different drugs. Like they're both both cause hallucinations and everything. But I think they both can have that same effect. I'm just talking from a user.
Your own experience.
I'm not.
You're not proclaiming to be.
I'm not giving any medical advice, but from experience, I think they hit the same part of the brain and they open up the same part of the brain and give you the same ability to have an experience that does, just open you up and have some positive outcome.
Like psilocybin's from the earth.
But they're different. The hallucinations are still different in their effect and the way.
As intense?
Oh, they can definitely both be as intense as each other according to how much you take, for sure.
See, my perspective, psilocybin's from the earth.
Yeah.
LSD was manufactured.
Yeah.
Do you feel like a psilocybin trip is more authentic?
I have felt on psilocybin that I've been more connected to nature. Like I have, there's just something about it when you're looking at trees and the earth, and you really feel connected to nature. And I think that probably does have, there's a role played by the fact that it is mushrooms and it is from the earth. LSD, I've still felt connected to everything, but more in a mental, spiritual sense of like, we're all just part of this great big picture, and it's all, you sort of view it as this whole big picture. But I think you're right. I think psilocybin connects you literally to the earth and nature in a little bit more of a bridging way. Like, yeah.
Have you seen the documentary Fantastic Fungi?
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah, that animation that they create about the Stoned Ape Theory. Have you heard of that? And again, it's so well animated and described. It's really interesting about
Basically.
the role of psilocybin in the evolution of man. So when like primal man used to follow herds of bison around through the fields, and the bison would shit everywhere, and the mushrooms would grow out of the cow shit effectively, and then they would eat them as a source of food, and then they were having these hallucinations and trips. But then it also prompted them to learn how to communicate in other methods, and that was when the development of language started to come about. That's the theory.
Yeah, those well explained. Yeah,
Thank you.
And whether or not that is true, I think it's a great theory, and it whether or not it's true, it still makes sense that could have happened to me after after having those experiences, because you just come out of it like with a whole new palette of understanding. It's like you've only been using one colour on the whole board, and then you come out of it and you've got an equal amount of the whole rainbow of colours on the palette, and you're like, oh my God, I can reach over and mix the yellow with the blue now. And yeah.
And also, like, this is where I feel like the universe put you in my life for a reason. I mean this, like, you talked about your night terrors and stuff. Like, man, I'm going to share this. I don't know if I've shared it on here before, but you really prompted it. But
yeah,
as a little kid, like, maybe 3 or 4, developing those first memories, I had the most profound dream that I can still to this day remember as clear as day. And I had a babysitter at the time. My parents were out of town. And it was when my parents were still together. They separated when I was pretty young. They were still together. And I had this dream where I was in this house, and this house always had this dark feel to it. It was an old house in a town called Nowra. And I just never felt good in there, Even as a little kid, it just had a yucky feel. And then I remember and I had this dream one night, and I was in the driveway of that house. I don't know if I can tell it. I'm going to cry if I tell it.
You can do it. You can cry too. You're allowed. I remember that. That's the house that I would go to, right?
I think so.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, not telling it.
Yeah.
Don't feel like crying today.
You can let it out, man. It's obviously a powerful moment in your childhood. Huge. I mean, that whole period, man, was just such a formative part of our years. And like you said, you were even wondering earlier if parts of your feelings and anxieties are linked to that, and clearly that's the case. I mean, that's such a huge part of your growth.
And then I won't go into the dream, but like in terms of just being like from another universe, like, and then like going into like throughout my sort of teen years and early 20s, Yeah, I'd have sleep paralysis all the time. Whereas
you did?
I'm awake in my body. I'm awake, my mind's awake, but my body's still asleep.
Yeah.
And you just feel like I just have this feeling something was pressing down on me, or something was literally, some entity was getting me, and I was like struggling to wake my body up. You know, I used to be. It was terrible.
Isn't it interesting that we both were brought up with the same really overstimulated belief in spirituality and demons?
Yeah.
And we both experienced those night terrors and sleep paralysis because as kids, what that did was reinforce the fact that yes, demons are real. Because at night I get attacked by them. So and then your parents confirm it, or your parent.
Yeah.
So of course you're left. Like, that's traumatizing, man.
Well, I just think it made me learn from a very young age that there's a whole nother realm. That there is a spiritual realm that needs to be constantly acknowledged. And again, like as you have been, I've been constantly drawn to Bali. And it feels like the most spiritual place I've ever experienced. Like, even when we just started the podcast, like, these local Balinese came in to lay out all the offerings and do their thing with the little temple that has to be in the house. You know, they're honouring the spiritual realm daily. And I guess I just feel it. Like, I feel connected to it. I always have.
Yeah. Do you believe so you believe that those experiences with the sleep paralysis and with all that and the dream and everything that you were going to talk about, do you believe that is connected to spirituality?
I think so, yeah. It's too profound. It's too vivid. Then I sometimes think, or is it linked to childhood trauma? You know, and my... Like, that maybe some... You know, they say people who've been traumatised in their childhood, they black it out and they suppress it. You know, but I was so young, I don't think I had that those traumatic experiences yet. Or was it the trauma from a past life? Or was it the trauma from my grandfather or my grandfathers, who were both World War veterans? Or was it the trauma being passed on through the genes of my father, who was traumatised himself?
Or was it the trauma of not a singular... You know, when we often discuss childhood trauma, we're talking about a singular event of being touched inappropriately or whatever that is. But trauma can be a long-term situational thing, such as the energy of parents breaking up or living in a home where the belief systems are overwhelming. And then that can manifest in singular experiences like possibly sleep paralysis and night terrors. Maybe that's how... The trauma of all that constant tension in your body over months and months and months of like being in a house where your parents are arguing or you're constantly being told that, you know, there's angels and demons and this and that. Maybe, this is just a theory, maybe when you go to bed at night and you try and sleep, it all manifests into this incredible moment where suddenly you feel paralysed and then you start hallucinating. I mean, I don't know which one it is either. I'm still... The jury's out for me. Like, I've really studied the science side of it, saying it's night terrors and sleep paralysis and it's hallucination. But like you, I've had so many of those experiences, man. Like, and they are so real in my brain. Like, I can still remember them so well, and they were. For me to convince myself that there was nothing in the room and nothing actually pressing down on my body and nothing, it's very hard to convince myself of that because I know how it felt.
Yeah. And there's not too many people you can verbalise it with.
No.
You've got fucking issues.
Yeah.
But here's another side of it. I haven't had those things for at least 10 years.
That's interesting.
And keep going. Why do you think it's interesting?
Well, even as we're talking about this, it makes me think about it more, is that the older we get, the further we move away from the childhood trauma and the more we're hopefully healing it, and the more we get away from those belief systems of shame and guilt and all the things that come with it, perhaps that the trauma isn't manifesting itself as much anymore and it's lessons and lessons, and maybe they were manifestations of that trauma. I mean, that's, you know, could that be it? Because if it was spiritual... If it really was spiritual, why aren't they doing it anymore? Why are they going, oh, he's getting older now, I won't hassle him as much?
Well, I've got a theory.
Okay.
Yeah. So about 10 years ago, I made this decision to stop using any sort of substance, drugs or alcohol. Okay. Not to say that I was a full-fledged alcoholic, but I think I drank alcoholically didn't drink every day, but when I did drink, it wasn't for the taste. It was just to get drunk. Every time I drink, I would get drunk, because I was chasing that feeling, that numbing, and it would provide this like sense of like ease and content, and the noise between the ears would switch off for a few hours.
Yeah, sure.
And so I decided to stop drinking, which led, and little did I know that I thought that my life would get much better. But what it did was all of a sudden I just, started getting healthier, and my brain started working more efficiently, and I became more sensitive to the world. And I went through it was a really raw period, like for many years of just raw, having to sift through myself and my identity and learning who I was as a person, and the decision to stop drinking was more because I just felt shit inside. I wasn't happy with who I was. I felt like I didn't know myself. And the non-drinking wasn't so much about the alcohol. It was time to just be honest with myself and face up to some of my own bullshit. Yeah, and I did. And then it led me on this journey of like, well, this is really hard, like being sober. I've got no escape here. And it actually led me to developing some form of spirituality, like to find that comfort in knowing that there's something looking out for me. And it really helped. And I started doing things like praying, and I'd go to AA meetings and connect with other people having the same feelings, because, most alcoholics, it's really not about the drugs or the substances. It's them managing mental illness for many, many years through that, but more maybe in extreme ways, and my behavior patterns matched all that. I could really identify, So as the journey's progressed, that peace between the ears is really settled in. And all of a sudden I have a real sense of identity. I know who I am, and I'm really content. I like who I am. I never had that my whole life.
It's so important.
Fuck you, Athron. Yeah,
it's huge, man. It's a huge.
I hate you,
man. They're positive.
I hate you.
They're positive tears. Don't worry about that.
It's really weird. You're cracking me open, but yeah. So it's like, because with girlfriends in the past, or my I guess ex-wife, like she would say I'd have night terrors, like you were yelling in your sleep, you were yelling at someone, or you were screaming, or you're kicking the blankets, or you were having a fight in your dream or something, and you're punching the blankets. It's like, what? I had no idea I was doing that. I don't have that anymore. I very rarely have a bad dream.
See, that's awesome.
And I think it's because I just feel this just soul peace that I've never felt before. Yeah.
That's amazing, man. That's really good.
But it's tenuous. Like, I'm not saying that, I'm cured, or I suffer from the human condition that we all suffer from. I just feel like that when you do delve into that rigorous self-honesty, it pays dividends, but it's really fucking hard as well, especially at the start. And then I think a lot of people just go, I don't want to face up to this. I'm happy to live with the disease, and I'm happy to live with, the discontent and be ignorant. And full credit to those people. I wish I could do it. It's just not me. I had to face up to it because I didn't want to live like that.
It's great that you did. Like, and we're never 100%. And the moment you think you've reached 100%, you've kind of just stalled your journey of growth, and you're not really going to grow much further if you don't think you can. So there's nothing wrong with acknowledging that you've grown, and then also being aware that there's a lot more to go. But that growth, if you can acknowledge it, it's really, you should acknowledge it. You should be happy with yourself. You should be really proud of yourself for opening up and letting yourself go and facing those things. I mean, you've got to be, because it's so much easier to do the opposite. It's so easy to get down on yourself and destroy yourself and look at all the negatives and think about how far you need to go and how little you've done. Like, it's just that's the easy way, Well, for a lot of people, including myself, it's the natural way. Like, it's the go-to. You wake up and that's what, and so, it takes a lot to take those steps to crack yourself open. Like, it really does. Like,
yeah, but the thing is, like, in that time, I've really delved into research. I'm just interested in mental health, and I've researched a lot about psychedelics. And I'll be honest, I'm an advocate for psychedelic-assisted methods and therapy if it's done in a way where there's an intention set, there's a set and setting created, it's not partied with, and I'm an advocate for it. I'll say it openly. I really do believe that it's a good thing for our society. I think that there's propaganda created around, its efficacy and its safety, but I think more and more like people are like it's pretty common now that it's not. It's a plant medicine. I don't see it as a drug.
Yeah, it's becoming very well acknowledged that that it can be used positively for mental growth, and it's also becoming really fucking obvious to society that the contrast of something like alcohol being available on every street corner and the effects of what that does to humans on an individual level, to relationships, to society on a whole, everything from drink driving accidents to physical abuse. Like, it's so obvious that there's a real mistake here, that something like that can be legal and pushed and advertised on mainstream daytime television, and then something like CBD or hallucinogenics or whatever that can be used positively are just outlawed and frowned on,
and those substances don't elicit violent behaviour.
They
all. Don't elicit reckless behaviours. In fact, it's the opposite.
Yeah.
I remember being at a music festival years ago, Big Day Out, and like we're smoking a joint, and these cops walked past. We're like, oh fuck, hide the joint, and they're like, don't worry guys, we don't care if you smoke weed. We're just glad you're not drinking.
Yeah,
because
isn't
they knew
funny?
that was going to be more problems for it. But they knew the stoners, they're not going to cause shit.
Well,
they're just going to fucking go introverted and maybe
hug each other
and eat some hot dogs and,
I remember years ago, like back must have been late 90s probably, I remember seeing a cop interviewed about a New Year's Eve, and he was like, oh, it was a much easier New Year's Eve because a lot more people are turning to ecstasy than just drinking themselves into fights.
Drinking themselves into fights.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah. He said something along those lines, and I remember he was really chastised for saying that because people freaked out and thought he was encouraging drug use, but actually he was just acknowledging the effects and the difference in those effects of something that causes your serotonin to rise and hug more people.
Imagine trying to start a fight on ecstasy.
Oh, mate.
Like, you just couldn't do it.
It'd be a pillow fight, and you'd be like,
feathers are so soft. I love it. Oh, man. It's not the drugs. You're my best friend. It's not the drugs talking, man, I swear.
It'd be a love off.
It'd be a love off.
Yeah.
Do you want to have sex with me? Yeah.
Oh, man.
Oh, dude. Wow.
Boom, smash some topics.
Dude, smash some topics, and it's like, for me, it's actually, I was sitting here talking to you and listening to you, it's like, it's just quite healing for me being around you.
Oh, man, thanks.
It's not too many people, like, it's those people in your life that know who you are and know where you've come from. Mm-hmm. They're precious, man. So I'm really, really grateful to be around you today, and thanks. And it's just been an epic episode. And
man, back at, exactly. I feel the same way. And I think that link we've got to that particular part of our past is such a strong, it's such a strong link. And man, just even the way you were just feeling then when you were talking about that period of your life, like that's how powerful that part of our lives was. And so to be linked to you at that time, it makes a big difference to catching up now for sure.
Yeah, man. And I look forward to continually documenting your journey, because that's what's going on now. It's been a few years since I had you on the first time and the second time. Second time was episode 99.
Yeah, right.
I think the first time was episode like 15.
Yeah.
So 99, this will be episode around 162 or 163. So...
I look forward to the fourth check-in.
Yeah. So listen, bro. I ask all guests to come with a cause they want to support or advocate for. A percentage of the Patreon subscription money will be donated to causes that guests advocate for, or we, still figuring all that out. I was actually emailing my Patreons yesterday about ideas about how we're going to disperse some of that money. So what do you got for us?
I mean, to be honest, the off the top of my head, the first thing I would think of, which isn't specifically a donation cause, but my friend Rizal, who you've interviewed on the show. Rizal
Abdulhadi?
Yeah, he's putting on a folk festival in Ubud, and I think if you're releasing this on Saturday night, it's in the middle of happening right now in Ubud, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, so you can still make it, but to me it's a great initiative to celebrate original artists in Bali who have had a really rough time with the pandemic and the entertainment industry being crushed and trying to survive and then get back on your feet. So I think if ever you wanted to support an industry and if you love music and you want to get something back for it, man, like you're probably hearing this on a Saturday night. If you're in Bali, head to Ubud tomorrow, Sunday, and go to the Folk Fest.
I might release this a day early, I think.
Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, it's 15th, 16th, 17th of July in Ubud. And I believe I can just quickly... Oh, you could put the link in the description.
I'll put the link in this episode's show notes. So if you scroll down, click on the link, you can buy your tickets. But also Rizal Abdul Hadi, he's very community-minded. It's a music festival, but it's also a community initiative. So if you ever see any events put on by Rizal, their roots, their ground level. He puts the people first.
He's a great guy. He's a really good friend of mine, and his whole attitude and the reason for anything he puts on is always really positive.
Yeah, and he's a political activist, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he's just a really down to earth guy who wants to build communities around music, and that's what he's always striving to do. And he's an incredible musician, incredible producer, and there's plenty of reasons to support whatever he puts on.
Oh, dude, how's his Rasandria? He makes those guitars out of bamboo.
I know, it's amazing. Yeah, dude. Like his guitar that he made, where he's got it's a bamboo guitar with a didgeridoo that comes out of it, that he plays guitar and didgeridoo at the same time. It's wild. And
he's just like this spirit animal. Like, he's the most chilled guy you've ever met. And when I had him on the show, he's like, I'll play a song for you. And he just starts playing and he just turns into this animal. Just power comes out of him.
Yeah, he's got a duo with a mate of mine who I play with a lot, a drummer called Reza. They've got a duo called Rhythm Rebels. We had them on the Bali rooftop, and they go off. Like, yeah, if ever you want to see just an upbeat, crazy act, it's awesome. Just two of them, it's wicked. Yeah,
I'll be there on Saturday, so
awesome.
I can't wait, man.
Sweet.
Yeah, man. So check out this episode's show notes for that link. You can also find this podcast on a variety of platforms other than the one you're listening to right now. It's on all the major platforms such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Buzzsprout, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Podcast Addict. I'm sort of losing track of all the different platforms it's on, but whatever platform you like to listen to your podcasts on, please rate and review. It just helps me to continue and spread the words of legends such as Athron. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, legend. Awesome. Thanks for having me.